Hey y'all, I've been working on this bread for a while now, and I am so ecstatic to share this one with you. Meet my new same-day gluten-free sourdough. Yep, you can make this bread in one day, people. No refrigeration necessary, no waiting for two rises. This bread has only one rise, and it rivals my regular gluten-free sourdough bread. It is so soft and so delicious, y'all. So let's get into it and I'll show you how to make it. The first thing you need to do is feed your sourdough starter. If you don't have one yet, go back to my tutorial on making a gluten-free sourdough starter. This is my active starter that I actually fed last night before I went to bed. You can also feed it very early in the morning if you'd rather not plan ahead. As you can see, my starter is rather thin, which I don't normally like. Lately, I've been making my starter stiffer because it seems to work a little better, but I'm going to go with it and show you that you can still make a great loaf of bread with a less stiff starter. So I'm weighing out 115 grams here, and I'll just set this aside for a minute until I need it. I'm going to need to make a psyllium gel for this recipe. So I'm starting with 350 grams of warm water, and I'm adding 17 grams of whole psyllium husks to the water and then just mixing that up until it's well combined. This is what's going to allow us to skip the refrigeration step so it can be kneaded right away. Can you do this with any of my bread recipes? Yes and no. Normally, I like the refrigeration step because it not only makes the dough easier to handle and shape, but it also allows the dough to develop flavor through extended fermentation. But since we already have flavor in our sourdough starter, for this recipe, it can go without that step. Now this will set up into a thick gel within just a few minutes, and then we can proceed with the next step. See how this is a nice thick gel? Now I'll just add the rest of my ingredients into the bowl, starting with that 115 grams of starter. And then 25 grams of olive oil, 17 grams of honey. I always like to start with all of my liquid ingredients. So in the recipe card, you'll see everything listed in the order in which I like to add them to the bowl. Next comes my gluten-free bread flour blend, the recipe for which is always on my website, linked within each recipe. And this is 350 grams. And finally, 7 grams of kosher salt and 9 grams of baking powder. It doesn't need to be the heat-activated baking powder like I've used before, y'all. Just regular old baking powder will do fine. I'll start kneading this and do the usual 5 minutes that I always do, and I'll stop to scrape down the sides if I need to. But while that's mixing, I'll talk to you for a sec about stiff starters. You'll actually find this dough to be very easy to work with if your starter is stiff. So how to get a stiff starter is usually just adding the same amount of flour to water, like a 1-to-1 ratio. So like if I use superfine brown rice flour, then I might add 50 grams of superfine brown rice flour and 50 grams of water. That usually does it, and that's usually all that's needed to get the perfect consistency. But there are times, and it also depends on the type of flour you're using, the type of whole grain flour you're using. Sometimes you may need to add a little more water. I would just go with just a splash more water if you need to, but don't be afraid to add a little here or there. Sourdough isn't really as precise and scary as people think it has to be. Okay, this looks good, so I'll scrape all this off the dough hook. Okay, I'm going to dump this out onto a well-floured surface, and I'll knead it a bit more just until it's a nice smooth dough. The reason I knead any of my bread doughs is because I found if I don't knead them and just like plop them right into the banneton or whatever I'm using, they'll have a real uneven crumb structure and will often have these huge holes in the bread. Kind of like when you get those store-bought little gluten-free loaves and all the pieces have huge holes in them. You know what I'm talking about. Trust me on this, that kneading will not ruin the crumb structure at all. It'll actually help it. So I'm just going to shape this into a, oval shape to fit my banneton. If you have either a round banneton or a round bowl, then you'd want to shape it into a ball. Okay, let me grab my banneton. These are really cheap, y'all. I'll leave a link for them. But if you don't have one, you can also just use a medium-sized bowl and line it with a tea towel. And I'm dusting it with my flour blend using one of my tea baller thingies. It's meant for brewing tea, but it works perfectly for this too because it's like a very fine sieve. Okay, I'm just going to cover this and I'll let it rise until it's nearly doubled in size, which could take a while, y'all, so be patient. In the winter, it always takes longer, and in the summer, it'll take much less time. If you have a warm proofing area like an oven that's been turned on for a few minutes and then turned off, that works great. I actually have a proof setting in my new oven, so I'm using that, but you can also use a proofing mat, which I've also shown in previous videos, and I'll leave a link for that below. But a really great trick, believe it or not, is to turn your clothes dryer on for a few minutes. Even if you have clothes that you left in there that need to be fluffed, as we say in our house when people leave their dry clothes in the dryer, that actually works really great. You can nest your bread right into the warm clothes and it'll rise beautifully. So little trick that sounds crazy, but it works. So I'll meet you back here when this is fully risen. Okay, it's been about 4 hours, y'all, and as you can see, it's well risen, not quite doubled in size, but definitely puffy and larger. I've been testing some of my breads using the finger poke method, and it's been kind of working. Not quite the same as gluten-filled bread, but pretty close, at least for when it's fully proofed. It should very slowly fill back in. I already have my oven with the Dutch oven inside, preheated to 450 Fahrenheit, and I have a small sheet of parchment here that I'll just flip this over onto. It feels a little stuck, so hopefully I can wiggle this free. Okay, perfect. I'm going to do something a little different in regards to scoring, and I'll explain that in a minute. But I'm going to get my Dutch oven out of the oven, and I'll very carefully put the dough in here so I don't burn myself. And I'll grab the lid and put it back in the oven and set a timer for exactly 6 minutes. I saw this method somewhere and it worked like a charm, y'all. Better than I've ever had with scoring. All right, y'all, my timer just went off, so I will take the lid off. Look at how this has already sprung up, y'all. So much. Let me fix my camera angle real quick so you can see this clearly. Can you see that? Okay, I'll slash it right down the middle. And you can probably see just how much easier this is to slash, right? It's going to open up beautifully. So I'll put the lid back on and let it bake for another 30 minutes. Check this out, y'all. Doesn't it look so good? Okay, I'm going to let this finish baking with the lid off for another 20 to 25 minutes. And then, of course, I'll have to let the bread cool down before I can cut into it. Y'all, listen to this. Can you hear that aside from the TV in the background? I just had to let you hear how this crust sounds. If you're a fellow celiac like me or have gluten sensitivity, you know how much really good bread means to us, mainly because it's so hard to come by. It's the thing we miss the most, wouldn't you say? I would, at least. And that's because gluten is the foundation of good bread. But I'm here to tell you that you can have good bread again, y'all. Not just good bread, great bread. I mean, look at this. This is the perfect artisan sourdough, gluten-free or not. The crust isn't the only thing this sourdough has going for it, though. Check out the crumb structure. It's as soft can be. So much so that I can hardly cut this. But I'm gonna. And look at how it folds easily without tearing, and how it pulls apart just like regular bread. And the taste, it's like it's been fermenting overnight. I literally have no other words. No words. Enjoy.